Canada Bay Council recently released the final draft of their Pedestrian Access and Mobility Plan, or PAMP. In this video, I'm going to look into whether Council is really interested in promoting walking to school. Will this plan make it safe for kids to walk to school, or are we going to see a continuation of the trend where more and more parents drive to school due to genuine safety concerns? If you're interested in having a look at the PAMP and providing feedback, you can find it on the Collaborate website. This is the second video in this series, and this one just focuses on walking to school. There's lots of other pedestrian activities, but this video would run for an hour if I covered them as well. We're just focusing on walking to school. My overall impression is that this report will really do nothing about creating safe walking routes to our schools. To say the least, that's really frustrating and disappointing. Now, hopefully, you'll stick around long enough for me to explain why. Let's assume there are 4 types of families in 5DOC when it comes to walking to school. There's the strong and fearless, there's the enthusiastic and confident, there's the interested but concerned, and there's no way, no how. Now, ignore the percentages in this graph here. This is just to demonstrate how the percentages in each group can vary a lot. If you're in the no way, no how group, there's really nothing Council can do to convince you to stop driving your kids to school. However, one benefit of other kids walking to school is the drop in traffic congestion, and I'm sure you'd appreciate that. Council really needs to be making it possible for families in the interested but concerned group to switch to walking or cycling to school. It'd be interesting to run a survey on 5DOC families to get an idea of how many families are actually interested in walking to school instead of driving, but are completely put off by their safety concerns. Anyone who drives to school around school times knows that traffic congestion has become abysmal. Now, these statistics are from Melbourne, but they show that 40% of car trips before 8 and 9 a.m. and 3 and 4 p.m. are drop-offs and pickups. It's no wonder congestion drops off so much during school holidays. Imagine if we could reduce that congestion all year round. How good would that be? Every kid walking is one less car getting in your way. So even if you don't want to walk, or your kids, it will be silly to stop other people from walking with their kids. That's important because the one thing that often prevents councils from making it safer and easier to walk is vitriolic objections from drivers. That's a pretty good example of an own goal. Parents aren't going to stop driving their kids around unless things change. So as drivers, we need to be prepared to make concessions. And the main one is going to be slowing down on residential streets. You can have speed or you can have safety, but you can't have both. If you want to see more kids walking around, you need to slow down to make it safer for them. If the idea of slowing down in residential streets angers you so much that you violently object to it, don't blame anyone else for worsening congestion. The root cause of the problem is you and your behaviour in your car. The percentage of kids walking to school has been dropping for decades. In New South Wales, 69% of kids are now driven to school. Is that doing them any good? The amount of physical activity that kids get each day starts to drop dramatically after the age of 11. In America, your average 10 to 14-year-old kid only walks 123 kilometres per year, and they hardly cycle at all. In countries where kids walk or cycle a lot more, obesity rates are much lower. Kids who are active are healthier, happier, and more socially connected. We're not the only country with this problem, but some countries have managed to turn this around and get more kids walking to school again. It can be done, but I can't see anything in this council plan that will make this happen. What's the use of a nice new pram ramp if your kid gets run over by a speeding driver? This report lists a large number of trip hazards that need fixing, but does nothing to stop you from being run over when crossing the road. Now, 2 in 3 kids are being driven to school. 50% of parents believed it's important that children be able to walk to school without an adult, but fewer than 1/3 believe it was safe for them to do so. New South Wales had the highest proportion of parents who said there was too much traffic for the children to walk to school. Now, note that their concern is traffic. No one is talking about the roads being unsafe. It's the traffic on those roads that's unsafe, and that's an important distinction. Some years ago, my partner took our kids to Croatia for a holiday. They couldn't drive on one section of road because there'd been a storm and a flood had washed landmines left over from the Civil War onto the road, and the army hadn't had time to clear them up. Now, that's an example of a dangerous road. We don't have dangerous roads in 5 we have dangerous traffic. You've got to make that psychological jump. Roads are an impersonal thing, while us drivers are the traffic. We don't want to admit that it's us, the drivers, that create unsafe traffic. We naturally seek to lay the blame somewhere else. We blame the roads, or we blame cars. But cars don't drive themselves, well, not yet. Just accept that it's the drivers creating the problems, and then we can start to think about the solutions. So how does this plan from Council address dangerous traffic? In point 4, it talks about developing and integrating pedestrian concentration routes that complement safer routes to schools projects. God, that's a mouthful. That sounds great until you look at the map provided in the plan, which gives absolutely no detail on safe routes to any schools. And then you look on the Council website for some safer routes to schools projects. In a case of 5 meets Catch-22, the Council website refers us back to the PAMP, which then refers us to the Council projects, which then refers us to the PAMP, which refers us back to the website, and round it goes. Point 5 says the PAMP should align with state government policy directions, but in January of this year, Transport for New South Wales released a new policy stating that pedestrians are to be given top priority. The plan makes no mention of this policy. I'm not sure that Council even knows that it exists. If they do, they're keeping very quiet about it. The plan also says that a hierarchy of pedestrian routes has been established around sites like schools. Well, I can't find any detailed route maps in the report. Here's how I think a detailed route map should look. Let's use All Hallows as an example. Now, the school has only one entrance on Halley Street, so all car and pedestrian traffic is funneled into this street. Remember that we've also got Little Pines Daycare Centre at the top of the street. Now, this is how kids living east of Great North Road can walk to All Hallows. Now, we lived in both Wareemba Street and Coranto Street, so I saw this traffic on a daily basis for years. For kids walking from the north, there's 4 danger spots along Pine Avenue, and they all involve road crossings. The first danger spot is caused by rat runners shooting down Russell Street and then doing a dogleg turn into Kirang Street, and vice versa. Drivers doing this are generally only interested in looking out for approaching cars on Pine Avenue, and they don't look for pedestrians crossing either Kirang Street or Russell Street. The second danger spot is the queuing of drivers from Pine Avenue into Halley Street. Now, this has been a problem for years, even when there's no traffic queue and there's been rangers and police turning up to try and deal with it, etc. But drivers turning into Halley Street do so quickly, and they don't look for pedestrians crossing from one side of Halley Street to the other. The third problem is just plain old speeding on Pine Avenue. If you're a parent with young kids at Little Pines, forget about parking on the other side of the road and walking across. It's just too stressful for most parents, and I don't blame them for preferring to drive to daycare and looking for a parking spot on that side of the road. Kids walking along Russell Street or Lee Avenue from the east also have to face getting across Pine Avenue without being bowled over by a speeding driver. And what does the PAMP say about traffic calming and building some safe walking routes to this school? The PAMP also makes reference to Council's local movement strategy, which was adopted in late 2019. Now, the local movement strategy talks about investigating safe routes to support walking and cycling, but there's no detail, and most of the content is plain motherhood statements. It's crucial to support walking and cycling to school by providing safe facilities along the key access routes. This includes signalised crossings, zebra crossings, separated cycleways and wider footpaths. Well, that's all great, but has Council designed, let alone built, even one safe route in the 18 months since the LMS was adopted? If you can think of one, put it in the comments. Have a look at the actions listed in the local movement strategy. Some of these were supposed to be looked at in the short term. There's no mention of traffic calming, and I'm yet to see any evidence that any of these actions have really been looked at. You'd think traffic calming near schools would be an absolute no-brainer, but Council seems to think otherwise. And apart from the consultants who wrote the PAMP this year, Has anyone looked at the local movement strategy since 2019? Now, I'm not having a go at the consultants that wrote the PAMP. They've followed the guidelines for writing a PAMP that were published by the state government nearly 20 years ago. They've delivered what they were asked to do. It's hardly their fault the council hasn't done anything with the local movement strategy in 18 months, or defined some safe routes to schools, or formally adopted the latest Transport for New South Wales road user space allocation policy. This is just one more report in a long list that illustrates, once again, the council really doesn't have a comprehensive strategy to make it safe to walk around our existing residential areas. It's crazy that when an area like Cabarita is redeveloped, all these ideas around traffic calming and building livable streets and creating safe walking routes are put into action. But for some reason, council doesn't seem to be able to wrap its head around the idea of applying the same principles to our existing neighbourhoods. Now, I don't know if it's a lack of awareness, a lack of vision, or a lack of capability. Maybe it's seen as too contentious and council doesn't want to deal with the blowback. Whatever the reason, our kids can't walk to school. They're getting fat and we're stuck in traffic all day. And it's only going to get worse. Is that a good outcome? Consider that next time you're stuck in a traffic jam near a school, cursing all the other drivers who are clogging up the roads. Now, the solution won't be quick and it won't be cheap. However, consider when Napoleon Bonaparte was getting ready to invade Russia. He called in one of his generals and told them that he wanted trees planted alongside the road all the way to Moscow. His desire was that his soldiers be able to march in the shade. Quite correctly, the general pointed out that it would take 20 years for the trees to grow enough to provide shade for the army, to which Napoleon replied, "That's why we must start planting today." It's a great pity the council doesn't have a plan where we could start remaking our streets today. We're not going to make it safe overnight for this generation of kids to walk to school, but if we start now, we can make it safe for future generations to do so.